Hello and welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB. I'm recording in the evening, so you get a little bit of the nighttime CGB action, but you're probably watching this on a Monday morning, and I'm doing something a little different. We're going to call this the Meta Monday Update. Now, my audience, most of you are casual MTG arena players. Some of you grind your way to Mythic, some of you play the events, some of you play for fun. But whatever it is, we play MTG Arena for the most part, and we probably like a variety of decks in our content. Otherwise, why would you be here? A different deck every day is the CGB way. And whether you are connected to the professional world of Magic, the esports side of things, whether or not you follow serious trends in tournament Magic or the meta, it will affect your play in Arena. You will run into it in free play, you will run into it in ranked, you will run into it in events. Anything you do in the Arena, you will run into the latest competitive trends in the Arena. And knowing how to beat them is an important part of deck building, it's an important part of play. So this Monday Meta Update is to tell you about the decks that performed in big events over the weekend that you can expect to see in the Arena, and also of course to fan the flames of ban talk, speculation, and nonsense of that matter, since it's ever present. It doesn't go away. This weekend saw the MPL Ruby division go into competitive play, but Golos was still a popular deck for them because Field of the Dead was still legal when they played their matches. I guess none of those results are going to have a big impact on our lives anymore now that Field of the Dead is banned. So instead, we will focus on an event that affected many of you because the Mythic Championship qualifier for MTG Arena happened over the weekend. That event is only open to the top 1,000 players from the last 3 seasons in limited and constructed ranking ladder on MTG Arena. So maybe some of you watching this played in it. If you did, I would love to hear from you. What did you play? Put it in the comments. Tell us your record, even if you O2 dropped or something like that. I was unable to play. I had a commitment on Sunday, a party that I could not get out of. So I knew I wouldn't make it, so I spent my Saturday making content instead. A little bit of regret there, but it's the way it is. But regardless, a big shout out to Mega Mogwai, another YouTuber. Awesome to see him doing well and making day 2 with his Grixis Fires deck. But let's dive in. I've got a little bit of a Reddit thread pulled up here that's probably pretty hard to read, so I'm going to just summarize it for you quickly. This is the top 16 who likely qualified for the next Mythic Championship qualifier, with their awesomeness in this event, if you want to call it that. And we have pretty much this summary of the top 16. We have 6 Sultai food decks, 2 Simek Food decks, and 2 Bant Food, or they also call it Bant Ramp decks. These are full playset of Oko decks. So 10 of the top 16 are full playset of Oko decks, if you want to look at it that way. We also have 2 copies of Golgari Adventures, 1 blue-white control list, 1 red-black aggro list, 1 Simek Flash list, and 1 Teamer Reclamation list. So in day 2, when they announced the top 128 who cut to day 2, it was around 60+% Oko. There's a thread here on Reddit that sums it up pretty well with some fun facts. There it is, fun facts about the Mythic Championship qualifier. The most played cards, Paradise Druid with 297 copies. This is from the top 128, just so that you know. According to this, there are 102 total deck lists. I'm not sure. I thought it was a top 128, but this says that there are 102 total deck lists, so not sure where exactly how that shook out. Maybe I got the wrong piece of info somewhere. 67 decks out of 102 ran a full playset of Oko Thief of Crowns. Okay. All 69 decks that ran Gilded Goose ran full playsets. Okay. And we see Once Upon a Time, Nissa Who Shakes the World, Gilded Goose, Wicked Wolf, Oko, and Hydroid Krasis making up pretty much one deck. All these make up part of one deck in a lot of cases, making up the most played cards. Along with, over here we have like kind of some also rans. But then we talk about the answers, the cards that people play to deal with these, the spells. And look at this, Veil of Summer, 247 copies. Noxious Grasp total, because 130 were run in main deck. How insane is this? 202 total copies of Noxious Grasp, and there were 19 copies of Aether Gust in the main deck. This is crazy. But some really fun facts. Breeding Pool, 296 copies. Let's look at the basic land count. There were more breeding pools in this tournament than islands, swamps, mountains, and plains. And look at the mountains and plains. Can't even break 100 copies in the top 102 deck lists. This is without question going to fuel debate about whether or not your boy Oko should be banned. And, well, I don't know if green and a 3-mana Planeswalker have ever been this dominant in Standard. This level of play is insane. I think that one thing that could hold that back is the fact that this tournament we had almost zero preparation for. The Golos Field of the Dead ban occurred on Monday. It wasn't live on Arena until Thursday, which means players only had Friday to even, and a bit of Thursday and Friday. If you're in Europe, you didn't have that much time on Thursday to test their decks. And if you don't have a lot of time to test, what are you going to play? You're going to play the Oko deck, but everybody's about to play the Oko deck, right? So what do you play given that everybody's playing Oko deck, and the deck that you know is the most powerful that wasn't banned is the Oko deck? Well, Davum here in Arena played a deck that many other people played. I believe it was the most played deck in the event, Sultai Food. This is an Oko deck designed to beat other Oko decks. Let's dive right in. By the way, to organize these, you'll notice I have them marked as singleton. We don't have folders here on Arena, so to make my display easier, I marked these as singleton, and then as I go in, I'm going to change it over to standard so it looks pretty, but just part of the interface that I have to show you here. So what do we have here? Well, we have most of the food package that you know: the Goose, the Druid, the Once Upon a Time, the Krasis, the Oko, the Wicked Wolf, and the Nissa. The black cards that we brought in are 4 main deck copies of Noxious Grasp, because it kills all the green creatures and planeswalkers that are so OP right now in the format. Just 4 of them, main deck. If you play against mono red, it does nothing. Cool, nobody's playing mono red. If you play against Grixis, it does nothing. Cool, only Mogwai's playing Grixis. I mean, this is pretty much the extent of proliferation of green in the format. So we have 4 Noxious Grasp, we have 2 Vraska Golgari Queens, and we have 2 Massacre Girls out of black. What is up with Massacre Girl? Massacre Girl is a comeback mechanism if you fall behind on the board, one of the only real ones that the deck has. In the green-blue version, sweepers are hard to come by, and Time Wipe is not really what you want to be doing, although you can do that in a Bant version. One of the main decks that was created to supposedly beat these Simek decks, think and talk at the same time. But one of the decks that was designed to supposedly give Oko and company in Simek a tough matchup was the Edgewall Innkeeper Selesnya Adventure deck, which plays a whole bunch of adventure creatures and goes really, really wide with March of the Multitudes, making a ton of tokens, and then using Flower Flourish and Venerated Loxodon to pump these tokens up. Now, this was considered a solution to the deck because in Simek, and even in Bant, they didn't have great solutions to this strategy. They were good at putting out planeswalkers that make a bunch of creatures and wicked wolves that kill good creatures, but they weren't good at handling a board with like 1,000,000 power and toughness. Enter Sultai. A couple of Massacre Girls will solve all of your adventuring problems. And Noxious Grasp is there, of course, to pick on the Innkeeper, because even the deck that's trying to prey on the green deck has to run green. So that's why Sultai rose to the top. In the sideboard, you can find a few other things. A Legion's End here, another Massacre Girl there, a Casualties of War, because why the heck not with a Liliana. But for the most part, these are just little flex slot changes where Vraska isn't good, you can bring in a few counter spells and Lovestruck Beast, and where Massacre Girl isn't good, you can get your Veil of Summer on and your Tameo for a little bit of grinding. But really the core itself is doing all the heavy lifting, and that is why Sultai Food is the most represented deck in the top 16 and will be probably the most represented deck on the ladder this coming week, so get ready for that. And I hear streamer Crokies was responsible for this in a big way, so a big shout out to him and his work on the deck. One thing for me, and I love Best of One. If you watch his channel, many of you probably do love Best of One. You may not all, that's fine. But one thing that I wonder when looking at a list is, what should I do for Best of One? And honestly, looking at this list, can you run Noxious Grasp in Best of One? I don't think so. That meta still carries enough variety where you get really punished for it. So Assassin's Trophy can fit right in, and you might want to run a few copies of Legion's End. But I don't know, maybe you can still, even in this Best of One world, run 1 or 2 Noxious Grasps without being punished too much. You can always target your own dying thing to gain a life after all. But yeah, this deck is just insane. It's the Oko deck built to beat other Oko decks, and that's why it was so successful. Moving right along, you'll see I can like flip my decks over to Singleton and then jump into the deck. We're going to take a look at the banned version of Food. This specific version was played by Heisenberg, or Heisenberg 96 on ESL, I suppose, Esports League. And this deck is just kind of a lot of the same stuff, but probably trying to make even less friends, as it features the beauty that is Teferi Time Raveler. And remember when this was the most annoying card in Standard? Some of you may think it still is, but obviously Oko has just snatched the crown from the king of obnoxiousness himself. This version goes a little bit taller. It does use Time Wipe, even though it's also in the process of making a large board in many cases itself, although Wicked Wolf with Time Wipe is great. You can sacrifice your food, keep your Wicked Wolf, and blow up other things, maybe returning your Krasis or your Gilded Goose to hand. It doesn't use the 2-mana cards like Paradise Druid, and instead uses Growth Spiral, and that's because you don't want your Paradise Druid blown up in your Time Wipe. And just because Paradise Druid gets eaten by Wicked Wolf out of the other Simek decks, therefore Growth Spiral, harder to eat. You do have to play a higher land count though. Small price to pay. This version doesn't run Once Upon a Time, which I find pretty baffling. The card seems nuts, but we are at a lower creature count. Once you have Growth Spiral, once you have Teferi, once you have 3 copies of Mass Manipulation and Time Wipe, your hits of creatures are much lower than they were before. And if your Growth Spiral is mostly going to be a land anyway, you may as well just play more land and use Grazer to get them out. Still, I don't know if it's right. Once Upon a Time is a nuts card, but this deck can say scoreboard. They made the top 16 of a big tournament. What do I know? And the other reason for white that is normally played here, Deputy of Detention, is noticeably absent. The card isn't as good without a bunch of zombies to kill. And when Deputy comes down and takes away a Nissa, and a Wicked Wolf takes out the Deputy, well, Deputy didn't do much there, did it? As the Nissa goes right back to work, possibly with as much or more loyalty than before. Much better to ramp to a high mana count and steal that Nissa anyway. In the sideboard, we do not even find a single copy of Deputy of Detention there, but we do find Aether Gust, big in the green battles, more Veil of Summer, another messed up magic card that green gets to play with, a few Voracious Hydras, a Knight of Autumn, and another Teferi and another Time Wipe to double down on the control game. Still fighting the good fight here is Golgari Adventure. The top finishing Golgari Adventures list comes from Kavartek. I believe this is Chris Kavartek, who also played Mono Green Stompy in the last MCQ, qualified for Mythic Championship 5, and was the last undefeated player at the last Mythic Championship, running a very aggressive build of Simek Food. He actually ended up losing out on day 3 on tiebreakers, found himself unqualified. So no problem, just top 16 again, qualify again. Mad respect. And doing it with a different deck here in Golgari Adventures. Kind of a good guy in this Oko world. Looking down at this deck and the changes, it doesn't have to be nearly as aggressive now that Field of the Dead has been banned. Questing Beast can go to the sideboard or get cut completely, as this deck has 0 copies of the card anywhere in the list. But what we do have is you see more of these Massacre Girls to clean up those wide boards, Find and Finality Side also taking on these wide boards, and Liliana Dreadhorde General to give it some staying power with those food decks that go with Nissa and just turn those lands into hard to deal with threats. You can just blow a few up with Nissa here, or make a chain of chump blockers that also draw cards when they die. Vraska is great for taking on Oko one-on-one, although of course if the food token just comes over and kills your Vraska, you're in a rough spot, which is why we need some early game as well. Enter Edgewall Innkeeper, a 1-mana 1/1 that draws a bunch of cards when you play other adventure cards. It lets you get away with 4 Murderous Riders, 4 Lovestruck Beasts, 2 Order of the Midnight, and 4 Foulmere Knights, which give you battlefield presence and remove the opposing threats. Still, the deck does need to jump up to these 4 and 5 mana cards, and all the way up to 6. Paradise Druid still makes the cut here to get Rankle down early, so that Rankle can start making the opponent give up those elk tokens they work so hard for. But we see it again. Green is so prevalent that 4 copies of Noxious Grasp make the main deck. If you want to play best of 1, you can definitely try Assassin's Trophy here, but giving your opponents lands is very punishing, and maybe you should consider some Legion's Ends, or even a few Disfigures, because even the Gilded Goose must die now and then. I found Crawl Harpooner pretty good for the job too. But yeah, this deck is, if it can figure out the Simic matchup, and you have to believe that Kvartek did, because my god were there a lot of Okas in this event, then this deck is a very strong grindy deck that can give control decks fits by going long and give aggro decks fits. It's an excellent rock build with a ton of built-in card advantage. So it's a good alternative to the Oko meta if you are looking for something different to play on the ladder yourself. Sometimes it takes a villain to kill a villain, and one player was able to make the top 16 with Simek Flash, a deck that, while extremely popular on ladder and in events and in free play queues for some godly unknown reason, it has never really broken through in the competitive sense. But here we are. The Simek Flash deck was piloted by Evan Jesus Wold, and this deck has some interesting things about it. One being a villain in itself. 2 copies of Oko, Thief of Crowns, to give the deck the extra annoying potential that you knew it could always live up to in the right hands. Also playing here is 2 copies of Mystical Dispute, again, a nod to the fact that not only is green so popular, but green with blue, therefore Oko, is so popular that you can main deck a card like this. The deck also has Essence Capture, Quench, Negate, the usual suspects, Once Upon a Time, and a notable 22 land count. Once Upon a Time often finding land can help out with that, but there aren't a bunch of other cantrips, so I'm kind of surprised that 22 lands turned out to be the right number. You can't argue with the success, and while I would normally just play 24 lands and not have Oko, Thief of Crowns in the deck, this might be the next evolution of the archetype. So if you are looking to make 0 friends on ladder, and let's face it, aren't we all, here is your deck, the one that causes rage scoops in free play on turn 2 on a daily basis. In the sideboard, we don't have any questing beasts. The card has actually fallen pretty far down the ladder, especially in the top 16, because of the lack of those Field of the Deads. And the card just doesn't seem to have the same effect when it can be turned into an elk and doesn't kill Oko on that first swing. Cerulean Drake gives a lot of respect to red decks that turned out to be pretty undeserved, as none of them seem to appear in day 2 whatsoever. My god, what happened to Mono Red? Also, Wildborn Preserver has no copies in the main deck, which is notable because a lot of people thought this was a flash slam dunk. But hanging out in the sideboard, there are 2 more copies. Maybe it isn't the 4 of that we all thought it would be. The villain still reigns. Good old-fashioned, just plain-up Simek Food came in second in the hands of Sorqueeks? I don't know. But this player took a deck with no splashes, no white, no black, just pure straight-up Simek Food, and qualified themselves for the next MC. We see not a lot of surprises. The list from the Mythic Championship had 4 Disdainful Strokes to combat Golos. In this deck, it's been trimmed back to 2, with replacements being some copies of Brazen Borrower, who also replaced a couple of the Voracious Hydras as well. Otherwise, there's not a lot of things to necessarily call innovation here. It's powerful. It's all the things in Standard that you don't want to see. The turn 2 2 Okos, the turn 3 Nissas who shake the world. The sideboard has the usual suspects with 4 copies of Lovestruck Beast to make life an absolute living hell for any aggressive deck that would dare try to step foot to this. And of course 3 Veil of Summers and Aether Gust make the deck almost uncontrollable. One of our heroes brought Temur Reclamation to the event, and that would be DFT Leonidas. This Temur Reclamation list is interesting in a number of ways, but once again, we see that main deck hate for blue in Mystical Dispute and green in Aether Gust. Basically, stop the Oko, stop the Nissa, slow it down. A few copies of Shock are a bit of a rarity in this meta, to be honest, but a few squeeze in here. Sometimes the goose has to be cooked. And there are 3 copies of Flame Sweep, which presumably just keep some of that pressure away, although they are specifically very not good at killing elks. 2 copies of Niv, 4 copies of Reclamation, 4 copies of Expansion Explosion. The idea against food basically being that while they're great now at killing creatures with Wicked Wolf and turning them into elks with Oko, they aren't great at dealing with spells on the stack, and Oko, for all his skills, ignores enchantments. So, this deck just tries to go over the top, explosion for 1,000,000, and win by going straight upstairs. The sideboard gives a little bit of versatility, but although for the most part stays true to the theme itself, 4 disdainful strokes, keeping Nissas, opposing Wilderness Reclamations, and other just general annoying things far away from you. 2 copies of Veil of Summer I was surprised to see, as I thought this would definitely be a 4 copy of Veil deck to avoid hand hate. Then you realize Thought Erasure isn't even seeing play in the top 16. So yeah, wow. We really are in a Thought Erasure-less world, not because the card is bad, but because the rest of the cards got too good. That blows my mind. If you're looking for some kind of a combo deck in Standard right now, this is probably the build that you should start with. And for best of 1 play, you'll have to decide whether or not running Aether Gust and Mystical Dispute is worth it. Perhaps there are some other cards that can take these places. Perhaps Shock is the right call. Perhaps a few more copies of Quench are a bit more versatile. But if you end up playing with it and have some best of 1 suggestions, I'd love to hear them. I haven't played with this deck type nearly as much as I would like to, and it looks like a very fun build. So congrats to Leonidas, one of the heroes of the top 16 for sure, with this Wilderness Reclamation deck. Antonino placed 3rd as another hero of our top 16 with this Rakdos Sacrifice list. 4 copies of Witch's Oven, 4 copies of Claim the Firstborn to turn your opponent's creatures into food, 4 copies of Cauldron Familiar, 4 copies of Priest of the Forgotten Gods, 4 Midnight Reapers, 4 Mayhem Devils. That's a lot of sacrificial nonsense. What is up, people may wonder, with 2 copies of Chandra, Acolyte of Flame? Isn't Mayhem Devil and Priest of Forgotten Gods with Chandra just the nuts? Yeah, it is, but this is really hard to cast. One of the things that you don't have in Rakdos is Once Upon a Time. Another thing you don't have is Gilded Goose. Your mana just isn't clean, and you can't fix it with creatures like Paradise Druid either. So, we have to have a ton of black sources. We have to be reasonable with our red sources because we want to cast our red spells, but we can't have 2 to 3 Chandra, Acolyte of Flame stuck in our hand while a second mountain is eluding us. Therefore, you just gotta trim somewhere. You have to. And Chandra, for all of the glory that is sacrifice 2 1/1s, deal 2 damage to a target, isn't that good against turn 3 Nissa. So instead, Cavalier of Night coming in. I've been so impressed with this card in my mono black builds. I'm not surprised to see it trying to make an appearance in Aristocrats. It actually has a huge battlefield presence, shutting down Elks and Elementals, as they have a hard time crashing against this, and it usually kills something on the way in. Angrass Rampage is an underrated card right now for killing Oko by going straight to the source and making the opponent sacrifice a Planeswalker. Can also get Nissa that way too, while Claim the Firstborn grabs those Elks and Elemental lands and uses them for your own nefarious means. That's why it can be 4. 2 Noxious Grasp, main deck. It's still happening. We have to do something to combat these green Planeswalkers, and if that means you have to main deck a narrow card like Noxious Grasp, that is what we're doing. If you were to play this in best of 3, maybe you just want 1 more Angrass Rampage and a Murderous Rider to take that spot, but this deck has to keep a pretty aggressive curve, and casting Murderous Rider is not really on the agenda. We need to be doing more powerful things than that, so I can see why it went this way, but congratulations to our Rakdos player, Antonino, and yeah, you are another one of our heroes. So mad respect for the Rakdos fans out there. Finally, rounding out our top performers, Edmvirus, Edmvyrus, the true hero, always in my heart. Mad respect. I might get a tattoo of your name on my upper thigh because I love you that much. Blue-white control. Blue-white control. Guys, I didn't think I'd see it, but you have no idea how excited I am to fire up this deck and play with it in Arena tomorrow. This deck is absurd. Look at the curve. If you just look at it on paper, the amount of 3-drops and the lack of early interaction is insane. The amount of top end with Gadwick the Wizen, Mass Manipulation, and Agent of Treachery looks undoable. But don't forget, you have Brazen Borrower, Petty Theft on turn 2, trying to set the opponent back and keep things under control. And 1-mana Mystical Dispute against other blue decks, and hopefully catching Oko. My god, Mystical Disputing a turn 2 Oko. Feels so good. Of course, Tranquil Cove, if you're on the draw, doesn't really help with that. Honestly, I am stunned when I look at this list. I am stunned to learn that this was able to make the top 16. I have such a hard time picturing it, how it comes back if it falls behind on the draw, but yet it made it. There's something here that I have to go explore and figure out. There are 4 copies of Time Wipe. There are 4 copies of Brazen Borrower. That is a lot of annoying value. There's Agent of Treachery and Mass Manipulation in the main deck. There are 27 lands, so you need to hit every single freaking land. And what is the win con for the deck? I mean, eventually we steal all your stuff. I think that has to be it. Making 1/1s from Castle Ardenvale and attacking with a 3/1 flyer just doesn't seem like it will get the job done. Still, if you can actually sit back in your life and call the deck that plays 4 copies of Absorb, 3 copies of Dovin's Veto, and 4 Teferi Time Ravelers the good guy, if you're like me and actually get excited to see a list like this, here is your hero. So congratulations to this amazing blue-white list and making the top 16, and god, I hope this deck is good. I'm so excited to play it tomorrow. That's your Monday meta update for today. I hope that you like it. I'm curious to hear what you have to say, if this is the kind of commentary and content that you enjoy, and if it helps you in your daily MTG Arena adventures. And don't worry, stay tuned. There's still a deck a day coming out. Your video is coming up, and yeah, I think are we still in green? Are we still making the green happen? Oh no, not at all. That's right. We're entering the white color challenge. White color challenge coming at you soon at the usual time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern my time. So make sure to check that video out. Consider liking and subscribing, and please leave me feedback for this video. Did you enjoy it? Should I talk more? Should I talk less? Should I talk not at all? Should I sing it? Should I do a musical number? All these things and more. Thank you for watching this video. As always, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.